Well, hello, this is Adam, and welcome here on the weekend to Rare Classic Cars, your source for automotive history and gab, facts, fun, whatever you want. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, I guess, my love-hate relationship with Cadillac, and specifically some of the worst Cadillacs, I would say, of all time. Now, I have to say, I own a number of Cadillacs. I've owned, past tense, even more. I've probably had 12 over my lifetime, maybe something in that zip code, most of which I have sold. And if you notice as you watch the videos, I tend to have a lot of mid-price luxury cars like Mercurys, Oldsmobiles, Buicks, Pontiacs. I don't have all that many Lincolns or Cadillacs. I have more Lincolns than Cadillacs now. And I enjoy Imperials, so for the Mopar fans out there, I do have some Imperials. But Cadillac is really one of these brands that, gosh, it's just, like I said, it's a love-hate relationship. So let me explain a bit why. I think that Cadillac in the late 50s, you can even say the 1949 sedanette coupe in particular, the 59 Cadillac, which was really the supreme development of the fin, at least from a General Motors standpoint, the 60 Cadillac, which I think is even better from a styling standpoint and sculpture, the 67 Eldorado. You have so many of Cadillacs that really set the design direction for many years to come and were quite revolutionary. Even the 1992 STS, I would say, or Seville and Eldorado were quite revolutionary for the time. But, you know, for me, I would say Cadillacs really had their halcyon days in that late 40s, 1949 period when they introduced their first overhead valve V8. Really until the mid-60s, about 1965, 1966. And then after that, it just kind of faded a little bit. And I know one of the former chief designers of Cadillac, who was the chief designer from the early 70s all the way through the late 80s. And one of the things that he told me when I asked him about, well, what happened kind of in that late 60s time frame? What happened to the interiors? If you look at the interior of a Cadillac from the late 60s or 1970 or 71 and 2, versus one from 1965 as an example, you'll see a dramatic drop in the quality. And he said the general manager, George Elgis at the time, was very focused on improving profitability and taking cost out of the vehicles. And I think unfortunately Cadillac really accelerated that cost cutting faster than the other GM divisions. If you look at a GM interior of a 71 to 76 full-size car and you compare it to the previous generation, none of them really stack up. And even the 1970 model year in particular of the 65 to 70 full-size cars just isn't quite as nice as the earlier ones from 65 and 6 and even 7. But Cadillac really accelerated that decline and a focus on profitability and throughput in their facilities faster than anyone else. To the point that in a normal assembly plant these days, you'll tend to see 55, 60 jobs per hour as it's called, or cars coming off the end of the assembly line, meaning that there's basically one a minute that's being produced. Well, Cadillac in the early 70s, they were selling everything that they could build, and they pushed their line speed up to about 70 to 75 cars per hour. And consequently, the quality just suffered. The build quality was poor, the material quality was quite poor. Really, you know, I think the engines and transmissions were still quite good. Although for me, personally, the 472 and 500 cubic inch engines, while very durable, reliable, robust, they're kind of unremarkable. They're not overly smooth or overly powerful compared to the offerings, the big blocks from the other GM divisions, or I'll call it the large displacement engines, because somebody's going to say the Pontiac didn't have a big block. Okay. But consequently, you know, what are some of the worst Cadillacs in my mind? Well, I actually think, let's start with one, and I'll be controversial to begin with. I would say the Cadillacs from 1971 and 72 in particular are some of the worst. And I've owned a number of them. And why do I say that? Not because of the styling. I think the styling, actually, I really enjoy it. But the overall driving experience just does not live up to the style. The interior materials are extremely cheap. The dashboard is relatively hard plastic. It does have kind of a nice driver's sweep around it. The pull straps and the doors, if you notice in 71 and 2, they have very small escutcheons and relatively thin pull straps. Well, unfortunately, after the doors start to sag on those GM cars, the hinge pins start to go. Then people yank on the pull strap to get the door closed, and then the pull strap pulls out from the back of the door card. And this was so common, in fact, there was a technical service bulletin issued that had the dealer actually drill a hole through the escutcheon, through the door panel, and put an exposed screw to better hold that escutcheon and the pull strap onto the door card. It's not really high quality, right? And you notice, I think the 73 door panel is almost an overreaction to the fact that the 71 and 2 was relatively dainty. You'll see these big anchor points and a big pull strap on the 73, and subsequently for some of the later years. Before, on some of the cars, they went to a casket handle that you would pull the door closed in the Cadillacs. So the interior materials on the 71 and 2 in particular, I think, are pretty bad. 73 slightly better. They redid the dashboard for 74 with a design where it had the warning lights all at the top. That one's a little bit better, but still not great. On those, you always find it's hard to get the air conditioning vents to stay in place. They kind of flop around, and they're plasticky. It's just not an overall great execution. And on the outside, the fit and finish of the trim and the doors and the hood and all the sheet metal is just abysmal. I mean, very, very poor. I would say the poorest of any of the GM divisions of the time, and pretty close to the worst in the industry, frankly. If I look at, I have a 72 Continental, and I look at the fit and finish of that car compared to a 72 Eldorado, it's not even close to a comparison. Continental has perfect gaps. Every single gap is perfect, everywhere. The sheet metal has no ripples, no distortions. Doors close perfectly. The Cadillac is just the antithesis of that. So that's my first one, I would say, is that in particular, the 71 to 6 generation, but the early years of that 71 to 6 generation, I think, are the worst, to be honest. Then we get into the fun period in the 1980s, the late 70s and early 80s. And I would say the 77 downsized Cadillac that came out is actually, in terms of a driving experience, an upgrade from the 71 to 6 generation. Less jiggle, a little bit better materials inside. Maybe still not quite overly remarkable, but it's better. And then you start getting into a whole host of challenges on the mechanical front with Cadillac. From the introduction in 1978 of the Olds diesel, which later became standard in 1980 in the Seville. Not good. And you could get it across, really, the Cadillac lineup. Then in 1981, the V8 6.4 engine. Again, not good. The overall engine, the fundamentals were good. It was a 368 cubic inch Cadillac V8, so really a smaller version of the 472 and 500. And so it was very durable and under stress, but it just, that V8 6.4 setup was not good. Then in 1982, you have the HT4100 engine. And if I had to say, of any of the Cadillacs that you really have to stay away from mechanically, I would advise staying away from the 82 until late 85 HT4100 powered cars, particularly the rear-wheel drive variants and the ones with the magnesium valve covers, not the fin valve covers. Once they got the fin valve cover, 1985 4.1, it had some improved block design and it was a bit better. But the 82 through 84, early 85 model years really just are not good. And also, some of the transmissions aren't that great either. At least they're not as strong as the transmissions they replaced, like the Turbohydromatic 325 or 200 R4. Some people get them to last a long time if you don't drive them all that hard, but they're just not the same as a Turbohydromatic 400 or 425. So if I had to pick any to really stay away from, I would stay away from that 82 to 84, late 85 HT4100 powered cars, especially the rear-wheel drive cars with that engine. They are just an absolute slug. About 17 seconds, 0 to 60. Yeah, that's right, 17 seconds. I think the quarter mile is probably 22 seconds at maybe 68 miles an hour. That's how slow they are. So that said, I have a number of HT4100 powered vehicles and they've been fine for me. I've never really had a major issue that I didn't know about. I bought one that had major issues and I had to fix it. But I baby them until the engine's at full operating temperature. I change the coolant every couple of years with the coolant sealing tabs. And that really has, I think, allowed me not to have any issues with them. And yes, some people are going to say the Northstar powered Cadillac starting in 1993. You know, the Northstar definitely has its issues, including head gaskets, which aside from the later years of the Northstar, they did have head gasket issues. I haven't had much problem because I've always bought low mileage ones and I've changed the coolant with the coolant sealing tabs. So those you got to be careful of. You don't want to get a high mileage one. I always buy, you can find plenty of Northstar powered Cadillacs with 20, 30,000 miles and you don't pay much for them. So I've driven them for years as daily drivers. And I kind of buy them with 30,000 miles, sell them by the time they get 70 to 80,000, and I never have an issue. But you don't want to keep it to 150,000. You are going to have issues with it. And of course, some people are also going to say the Cimarron. Now, I will say, personally, I don't mind the Cimarron that much. You know, it's a homely looking car. They couldn't really do much with the vehicle because of the time frame in which Cadillac was trying to introduce it. And that car was actually supposed to be off of the X-Car platform originally, the Citation, Phoenix, Omega, and Skylark. But the General Motors believed the production capacity for those X bodies was full. So they moved it to the only other platform that had spare capacity and they could get it out in time, which was the J body, the Cavalier, the J2000, or the Sunbird, the Olds Forenza, and the Buick Skyhawk. And I really don't mind the Cimarron. I think particularly with the V6 engine, it's kind of fun to drive as a used car. Would I have been thrilled with it as a new vehicle? No. As this anachronism and something just to have fun with now, they're kind of cool. Except I would stay away from the first year with the 1.8 liter wheezy four-cylinder engine. I think was somewhere between 85 and 90 horsepower. And it only lasted 1 year in 1.8 liter form. They upgraded it to the 2 liter in 1983. And that 1.8 is just terrible. So stay away from that. But in general, what are the worst Cadillacs I would say of all time? You know, those cars, 82 to 84 with the HT4100 engine, that Cimarron with the 1.8 liter engine, and then generally that 71, 72, I think, car, just underwhelming. Again, the 71 and 2 are going to have reliable powertrains. You're not going to have a problem with the engine or the transmission or the rear end or things like that. But the rest of the car just isn't going to feel high quality to you. I mean, who wants a Cadillac where the gaps don't fit, you know, the gaps don't line up, the trim doesn't fit, the doors sag, even the low mileage cars. I've never had one of those with over 40,000 miles, and I've had plenty with under 10,000 miles. And you still get saggy doors, even on the sedans as well as the coupes. So, hence why I don't have all that many Cadillacs. That said, I do really love some of the high-styled Cadillacs, like of the late 60s, my 69 Eldorado. I wish it were a 67, but 69 was what I found in beautiful shape, and I love the 472 much more than the 429 engine. So, and it was Ramper green, so I loved the color, so I picked that. But I just thought I'd shed some light on what some of the Cadillacs are that you might want to stay away from, and in my mind, what some of the worst Cadillacs are of all time. Not everything about them is bad. Styling is not necessarily bad. Although you do have some of the rubber flubber bumpers, too, bumper fillers in those years, which kind of stink. They crack. And now to get them replaced and fitted properly, you might be spending thousands of dollars. It's not cheap, and the replacement parts don't fit well. But in any event, hope you enjoyed this little discussion on Cadillac. We can certainly talk more about it and the best Cadillacs as well. And we can do it from the tranquil setting, so long as the weather is good. Until next time, hope you enjoyed this chat, and take care.
Thanks for watching this video on the worst Cadillacs of all time. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe, as that helps the YouTube algorithm serve it up to more viewers like you. If you really liked it, feel free to hit the super thanks button, which is the heart-shaped icon with the $ sign in front of it at the bottom right of your video viewer. And until next time, check out some video links at the bottom left and right for you. And if you're not yet subscribed, click the circular icon at the top left of the 67 Buick Riviera. Thank you again for watching, and until next time, take care.